RCTP, Level 3, Mental. To begin your mental journey, you're going to have to prepare your mindset. You're going to have to start to include positive statements. Things like, I presently struggle with my mental strength, I'm taking steps to increase my mental strength, and I can make this move. And you want to avoid negative statements like, I can't climb it, it's too scary, I don't have mental strength. Also, for all of the belayers out there, you need to be comfortable with small wins with your rock climbing partner and be happy when they make progress. So if they make even just a small amount of progress, that's great. Let's look at how you change your behavior. So the behavior we want to change is being afraid of heights or of falling. And what do we do to start to become comfortable? Okay, well, we're going to have a stimulus. No matter what we do, we're going to climb up to a route and we might get nervous for some reason. And then our auto behavior is to either tense up or to have Elvis legs or to get afraid or to have self-doubt. And this is the things that we don't want. So when we come down from the wall, we can often reflect and say, man, I wish I did something differently in that situation. So this is what we're going to be covering, is that no matter when you're climbing, you can't control that stimulus. So when you climb higher, you're just going to start to, feel those little fear monkeys starting to come in. And then what do you do in this situation? Well, you insert a thought. That's what X is, or an action. And by inserting this thought, you then trust yourself and you start to have a learned behavior. So if you're going to think about, what's going to be the go-to thought process that you need for this when you start to get a little nervous, is that you start to think, it's okay, I trust my gear, and I trust my belayer. Now, throughout this whole next section of mental training, we're going to go over multiple stimuli and different ways that you can either have different thoughts or how you can have different actions, and that's going to lead you to have a learned behavior of not being afraid and continuing climbing and pushing through those next sections and eventually making your way to the top. Okay, so our initial step 0, is that we combat nerves. So this is whenever you get nervous, take a deep breath. Try to identify why you're nervous. If you can't identify why you're nervous, just go straight to that golden thought. It's okay. I trust my gear. I trust my belayer. If you can identify why you're nervous, tell yourself it's okay, and then tell yourself the logic of what you need to do in this situation, and then do it, and trust yourself. Inspect and know your gear. Step 1, purchase quality gear, store it out of sunlight, throw it away, and replace at the end of life. So let's look at, how do you inspect a harness? If we have a harness, sometimes on your harness, you'll have a belay loop that has an indicator. So you can look at this, and what the manufacturer has done is on your main belay loop here and here, the color actually changes once you start to wear it down to like too much of a point, and it's going to now become compromised. So you can just look at your 3 main loops right here, and you try to see if you have any types of wear and tear. And if you see significant wear, you know that now it's the time to replace your harness and throw this out. I had to dig around a little bit, but I managed to find a carabiner that had a little bit of wear on it. So if you notice this carabiner here, there's a little bit of wear that's coming through, and that's because this is a metal on metal grind. And this is my main gree that I use. This gree is getting a little bit old. I maybe should replace it soon. But if you notice, you start to have a little bit of a notch that's starting to form in some of your metal carabiners. Once this gets a little bit deeper, I will replace this carabiner, just throw it out and buy a brand new one. How do you inspect a rope? You might not have actually been instructed about how to purchase a rope, what types of qualities you're looking for, and what it's made out of. So a rope is mainly made out of 2 components. The first part is the sheath, and that's the colored, beautiful, braided section that we see here. The second section is the core, and that's the white part that we see in the middle here. Okay, so the way that you inspect your rope is that you go through it, and you can kind of pull through it line by line, and if you get to a part that you see all this fuzzy stuff on the outside, that's okay. That's just your sheath getting a little bit of wear and tear. This, as you notice, I kind of got to it within my first 1.5 to 2 meters. And that's very typical because this is the part of your rope that takes the most wear and tear. That's mainly because this is like where you always will hang on a draw, or you might fall a lot on this section. So what we want to do at this section is we want to visually inspect the rope, and we want to see if we see any white coming through. So that white is the core that's now coming through, and that's a big issue. You do want to inspect your whole rope and see if you have any of that white core coming through, but if you have a larger piece, that's a pretty big issue. The second thing that you want to do is just feel how the rope feels. Does it feel very loose? If it does, then that's your core that's become too compromised, and now you shouldn't be using that rope. The other thing that I just want to mention is that there is a UIAA fall rating, and that's how many times you can fall pretty heavily on your rope. So taking a big whipper, which is just a really big fall. So how many whippers you can take on your rope before it might break on you. So this rope, I believe, has a UIAA fall rating of about 9 or 10. So after my 7th or 8th big whipper on this rope, I decided to retire it, and I'm not going to use it again. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is that anytime you do take a whipper on your rope, you should give it a little bit of time just to rest and relax, just to help it gain back its elasticity. If you take repeated whippers in the exact same section and you do this 6 times, then you might actually end up snapping your rope because your rope hasn't been able to just regain its elasticity and contract back to its normal resting state. What's the general rule for replacing your rock climbing gear? How long should you keep your materials? Well, a general rule of thumb is anything made out of nylon, like these 2 objects, these should be kept for about 5 years. So nylon degrades in the sun. It has great absorbing properties for our falls, but it does degrade in sunlight. So you should be storing this gear out of sunlight, and after about 5 years, if you're unsure if your equipment still is good or not, then you should be replacing it and buying new gear. The second rule of thumb is with metal. So any of these types of clips, straws, all of this. Any type of metal, you should be replacing these about every 10 years, or through a visual inspection again to see if it's worn down.